Crunching Tackles, where we break down the hardest hitting social issues in sports. On today's show, we've seen an almost unprecedented amount of movement among head coaches in the NFL. What is causing this trend, and is it going to continue? My name is Chad Wylie, and with me, as always, is John Nekrasov. And John, I feel like we need to do just a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning of the podcast because it's a new year, and in many ways, it is a new Crunching Tackles podcast.
It is very much a new year, new us, because we are doing a full video podcast for the first time ever. We're going to be on YouTube and Spotify video moving forward, which if you guys have been with us for a long time, is a completely new experience. So we're excited to have you. And if you're completely new to the show and are just finding us for the first time, we're also very excited to have you. This is a show that we have been doing since our college sports reporting days in 2020. And we've been doing it ever since, talking about the social issues at the heart of sports that make sports meaningful and make sports serious. We have fun here. Sometimes we talk about movies a little bit. We talk about actual games, but we also spend most of our time talking about the things that maybe don't get covered on ESPN or Fox or CBS a lot of the times, the things that cause controversy, the things that cause excitement. And that's what the show is all about.
Yeah, so if you are a long-time or short-time listener to the podcast, you now have the opportunity to watch us on YouTube. We're at Crunching Tackles on YouTube. We just created this channel, and we're going to begin posting these episodes to it. If you have found us on YouTube and you're wondering what the first video on this channel is, just know that we do have like a 5-year backlog of podcasts that you can go back to and listen to if you want. We are not going to be, unfortunately, able to back post all of our previous podcasts to YouTube. So in many ways, this is kind of like a new feed on YouTube. But we do have a lot of content from our backlog category of audio only podcasts if you're interested in that. Yeah, I'm excited to potentially be reaching a completely new audience on YouTube and the opportunities that video presents. This is a trend that kind of, it seems like every podcast has kind of been forced into in the last few years is entering the video model. And while it's not the most comfortable thing for two guys who are used to just talking behind the anonymity of a microphone, we are keeping up with the trends and embarking in this world.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's crazy. This has been, I actually just thought about this. It's been 6 whole years since we started the show. So there's a lot of content back there, from everything from covering the human rights controversies before the 2022 World Cup, all the way to Olympics, doping, to tennis, to betting and gambling controversies, which we'll get to it a little bit. This is a place where we want to dive deep into what makes sports such a complicated and fascinating world. And we're really excited that you guys are here on this journey with us. Do you want to, should we introduce ourselves a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So again, if you're a regular podcast listener, you can fast forward, I don't know, a couple minutes. But if you are new with us, my name is Chad Wylie. I primary sports bona fides are as a Manchester United and Pittsburgh Steelers fan. John and I are friends from college. We went to Liberty University, where we both were working for the newspaper. As part of a class project, we decided to try an episode of a podcast. And we talked about Qatar obtaining the rights to the 2022 World Cup. And the vibe was good, and we decided to keep it going through life. And so soon after we started our podcast was the COVID pandemic. And then I got married, and we graduated, and this podcast has continued ever since then. But as far as it goes for me, I've been a sports fan my whole life. I follow way more sports than I have time for. And I enjoy movies a lot. I enjoy reading and writing, and I work full-time for a Christian communications ministry called Wisdom International. And that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah, and I'm John Nekrasov. Like Chad said, we met in sports journalism classes and working for the newspaper, going and covering soccer and football and basketball games and all kinds of different contexts. And that was part of kind of the culmination of a life just loving sports for me. I grew up as a huge soccer fan, a huge Arsenal fan. And in my time in college, I kind of really expanded my scope a lot and came to love everything from tennis to football, to sometimes a little bit of baseball, not very much, but I do partake in all the sports to a degree. And I don't know, I've always had a deep love for history as well. And so this show is kind of an opportunity for me to dig into all the different areas that I love, and also talk a little bit about movies too, which has always been like a small part of this show because we both just share that love. I am a Nashville native, basically. I just got married last year to my wife Katie, and yeah, I in my full time job, I work in cybersecurity for a healthcare company. So that's I don't get to do sports all the time, but this is a real fun part of life for both of us.
Very cool. Yeah, like John mentioned at the beginning, we are a podcast that will occasionally talk about the results of the NFL playoffs or the Australian Open or Formula One races. But in general, this podcast was founded and continues to be about the intersection of sports with social issues, whether that's um, issues we've covered like Black Lives Matter in 2020. We've covered a lot about equal pay. We've covered a whole lot about sports gambling, corruption in FIFA. So, like I said, if you are new, there's a whole lot of things that we've already talked about, and we're just going to keep this thing going. We are the same podcast, just branching out into new platforms, which is super exciting.
It is super exciting. Without
With
further
that
ado, do you
said,
want to get into
yeah,
things? Yeah.
yeah, let's absolutely dive in. John, well, we can do some pleasantries. How are you doing? I know that you are about to tuck into a nice weekend of snow, and that's exciting.
Yeah, so I live in Nashville, like I said, and Snowmageddon at least supposedly hit us this weekend.
But
But the
you have
thing
had
about
snow,
we have had snow. The thing
yeah.
about Nashville and Snowmageddon is that like if you get an inch of snow here, everyone's like, we're shutting the entire state down. And so the news, the weather predictors were all like, Nashville's going to get a foot of snow. Like you are going to be buried under so much snow that you don't even know what to do with. So Kroger, like I went to Kroger on Wednesday. We're recording on a Saturday, and there was literally like there was no meat in the store. Like the store was completely empty. There was no produce in the store, essentially. So people were ready, and now we've gotten like maybe an inch and a half. And I think we're gonna have sleet the rest of the day. So it's still a snow weekend. And I think the roads won't, because of the ice, will not be passable for a while. But I don't think the promised foot of foot of snow blizzard is going to hit us here, unfortunately.
I think not. I have not, as of right now, at 3 o'clock on Saturday. We have not had any snow or rain in Raleigh yet, but we are expecting some
Okay.
overnight.
I was gonna say
We'll
like
see.
none at all.
No, nothing yet. But
Okay.
supposed to start very, very late Saturday night and then continue to be what they call wintry mix all day on
Hmm.
Sunday. So we'll see. We've already, it's funny, the previous in this winter, the threat of snow has already canceled 2 school days, and there actually was no snow. But that's how reactive we are here in North Carolina to snow. If it might snow, school gets canceled for a couple days at the minimum.
That's just life in the South.
Yeah.
I've lived here basically my whole life, and it kills me every single time. But the problem is like the infrastructure; they don't know how to deal with it. So if there is actual snow, it is a genuine problem, even though it feels so ridiculous and reactionary.
So funny.
It does shut things down because people don't know how to drive. I swear.
Yeah.
Every time there's snow, like I literally see people just like skating down hills in their cars because they don't know how to like deal with ice on the road. And I'm just like, guys, what are we doing here?
It's life in the South. Unbelievable. Any listeners in the North are like, we got 18 inches of snow and are still driving to work the next day. Like, just a completely different perspective. We have an awesome episode here today. We're going to do a little bit of conversation about the AFCON final, which was unbelievably dramatic. And then we're going to talk a little bit about gambling. And then we're going to spend a good bit of time on the NFL playoffs and specifically like I mentioned in the intro, the unusual amount of head coach firings and resignations that have happened this offseason. But before we do any of that, John, I do want to just acknowledge that we had quite a bit of success on social media last week with our clips, particularly our movie related clips. On my TikTok, there's been a whole debate in my comment sections about the merits of Eddington, which has been very fun. But your number one movie of the year, Train Dreams, had quite a successful showing at the Oscar nominations that happened on this past Thursday.
Yeah, it did. It had 3 nominations, I believe, for cinematography, Best Picture, which is very exciting. You know, it's not going to win Best Picture, but I think it is a good shot at cinematography. It won the Golden Globe for cinematography just last week or a couple weeks ago, which was super exciting. And also got a nomination for Best Original Song, which, to be honest, I don't. Did you listen to the Best Original Song? Like, I must have just skipped, like clicked out once the credits rolled, because I didn't remember any Train Dreams original song.
I did not listen to it. I heard a song and the credits started, and then I did not stick around for it.
Yeah, Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters is going to win that for sure. Much to Chad's chagrin, who refuses to see K-pop Demon Hunters, but
I am going to see it.
You are going to see it? Okay.
I have decided that I am going to see it.
So funny. Eddington got blanked, unfortunately.
Yeah, very disappointing. K-pop Demon Hunter nominated for 2 more Oscars than Eddington, which to me is just a crime. But here we are.
Category fraud.
But yeah, so it'll be fun. I mean, of course, we'll talk about the Oscars when they happen. That'll be fun. That'll be in a couple months, and we'll have a good time with that. I still have a couple movies in the Best Picture race I need to see that I'm very excited about. So, lots to do, and lots to do in the sports world, John. So without further ado, we're 11 minutes in. Let's dive in. Is the AFCON? The AFCON is the international soccer tournament for the continent of Africa. It's kind of their equivalent of, I guess, the Gold Cup in America, or the Copa America in South America would kind of be the equivalent. The Euros in England is a every 2-year or every 4-year event. 4 year. And so the AFCON tournament has been going on for the past few weeks. It's been taking place in Morocco. And we had an unbelievably dramatic and contentious and, unfortunately, almost violent final to that tournament.
Yeah, it was an absolutely crazy turn of events, because the most of the tournament was actually pretty pedestrian. Like, everyone was playing pretty solid defensive soccer throughout a lot of it. Senegal and Morocco faced off against each other in the final after both being pretty consistent throughout the tournament. It was interesting. I was looking at, Morocco went to the semifinals in the last World Cup in 2022. So we know that team is solid. But I was looking at Senegal's roster, and basically every single player on the Senegalese team plays in Europe. So, we've talked about the USA's issues with having an actually deep roster of players who are playing at a high level consistently, and like Senegal has a really solid roster. So that was impressive. They performed pretty well and made it to the final against the host Morocco, and that's where things got chaotic. But yeah, for a little bit of background, AFCON, unlike most continental tournaments, happens every 2 years instead of every 4. So the Euros happens every 4 years. AFCON happens every 2, and it happens generally around January, which means that it interrupts the club season for any African players that represent their countries. They leave their club teams for basically a month and go compete in Africa's continental tournament. So that means that, Premier League teams and teams from all over the world lose a significant chunk of their players if they have African players. So that always causes a little bit of controversy on the domestic side of things for those different countries. So there's been a push kind of constantly, kind of led by clubs, I think, that, this needs to be something that doesn't happen so frequently, so they can actually like keep their players. Like Mohamed Salah, Liverpool star, was basically gone from his team for almost a month.
Yeah, Manchester United had 3 basically starters leave for the month.
Right. So it is a pretty big disruption on the club side, but on the African side, I mean, it is a really meaningful tournament for them. It also comes often with a lot of chaos, and this year was no different. It's important to note that starting in 2028, this actually will become every 4-year tournament. So that's a push that Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, was kind of leading, and the African Confederation has kind of gone along with that. So that is going to be a big change that'll happen. I think the timing in the year will stay the same, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, so now we get to the final. I wasn't able to watch this because I don't have the channels for it, but I watched the highlights of the final and some of the highlights throughout, and it is one of the most unbelievable situations that I have heard about in a soccer context.
Yeah, so in regulation, Senegal had a disallowed goal that was very controversial. And then toward the beginning of it went to essentially the soccer's version of overtime, extra time. And in the ninth minute of extra time, Morocco were awarded a very controversial penalty decision that led Senegal's manager Pape Thia to order his team to leave the field in protest. Like he was basically going to quit the game as a protest of what he believed to be blatant referee corruption in awarding Morocco a penalty. I don't know exactly how the team came back. I don't think the commentary didn't do a good job of explaining what were the circumstances that caused the team to come back, whether it was players intervening or something else. I don't know. But regardless, Morocco ended up missing the penalty. Brahim Diaz missed the penalty. And then Senegal went on to win the game after all that drama. There was fans trying to storm the field at the end. It was a whole thing. It was kind of scenes that you see, and they're kind of common if you're watching like the Argentinian domestic league or something like that, like Boca Juniors River Plate, kind of just like real
Mm-hmm.
drama. And it really seeped over into this final. I thought it was pretty, I think it's pretty poor as a manager to try to just like essentially try to protest a game by forfeiting, especially at 0-0. Like the game was in no way out of hand. And obviously it turned out that they ended up winning. I know Senegal is going to be one of the two or three best teams out of Africa to play in the World Cup this summer. And I have a lot of questions just about the professionalism of this manager, given that circumstance.
Yeah, I mean it's a fair question. I will say, so there had been controversy surrounding Morocco getting kind of favorable refereeing throughout this tournament. So this was not the first time that this had come up, and Morocco had made it all the way to the final. And so, given that the penalty was given basically with the last kick of the game, if Morocco had scored, they would have won the trophy. So I think that was where Senegal was basically just like, we're not going to let this happen. I did see people on social media laughing that they were like, all the managers now that love to throw people off, taking notes, to ice last minute penalty takers by threatening to walk off and then coming
It's the
back.
ultimate version of the head coach calling the timeout right before the field goal.
Yeah, 100%. So that's super funny. But yeah, like you said, I mean, Senegal seem to be in a good spot. They are in a group with France and Norway, however. When
Yeah.
the World Cup starts, that's going to be a tough group. But we have some exciting news. So we had something that we don't usually have in these kind of circumstances, which is basically an on the ground reporter. So during the tournament, our friend Christian and his wife Rayanne live in Senegal, actually, where they work at a school, and so they were following along very closely with the Senegalese team as they were making their way through the tournament. And he sent us in a voice note about his experience watching this final and what it was like on the ground at Senegal.
Yeah. So without further ado, a very special on the ground report from the AFCON final.
Hi, John and Chad. Thank you so much for including me on the podcast. I wanted to first say I'm a longtime listener of Crunching Tackles. I remember when we all worked at the Champion together when you guys started this podcast, and I've been following you guys ever since. You do a great job. I love listening each and every time when the podcast comes out and just hearing your guys' perspective on current events, and I appreciate you including me on this edition of the podcast. My wife and I currently live and work here in Dakar, which is the capital city of the country of Senegal in West Africa. We've been here for the past year and a half working at a school here, and we've had the wonderful opportunity of just getting to engage with the culture and get to know what life is like here. And of course, as you guys are well aware and know, outside of the U.S., really, soccer is everything. I mean, football is huge, and yeah, still processing a little bit of what happened last night. I'm recording this on the morning of January 19th, so the day after the AFCON final between Senegal and Morocco. And wow, it was such a crazy game. I will just give a disclaimer that I did not necessarily grow up as a big soccer fan. I've only really started following the sport in the last few years, although I am a huge sports fan in general. And so I might I'm still processing everything. I don't know if I fully even understand everything that happened last night in the game, but truly it was a wild experience, and I just wanted to share a little bit of what it was like here on the ground in Senegal. So first, just to give some context, the game was it was a really great match in the finals of the AFCON. Morocco, obviously coming off of the 2022 World Cup, where they made it all the way to the semifinals. They're by far one of the best teams on the continent, and they were hosting the AFCON tournament in Morocco. This game specifically was in the city of Rabat. And Senegal is a great side as well. They have done well the last few years in the World Cup and won the AFCON tournament 2 AFCONs ago in 2022. And when it was played in Cameroon, they beat Egypt in the finals in that one. So it was a really good matchup, close game the whole time. It came down to quite the crazy ending, as I'm sure you guys maybe saw some of the highlights or heard about. So first of all, there was an extended amount of added time at the end of the game because there was a pretty bad injury to a Moroccan player in the 65th minute. The Moroccan offender and a Senegalese defender kind of hit heads when they were going up for a header, and it was pretty bad injury, so there was quite a bit of stoppage time. There was 8 minutes added, and the game was 0-0. There was some good chances for both sides. It was, intense, everything you'd hope in a final of a tournament like this. And then in the 92nd minute, so 2 minutes into added time, Senegal scored what looked like it was going to be a winner on a corner kick. But pretty immediately the ref waved off the goal, and they called a foul on one of the Senegalese guys who took down a defender for Morocco. And so they pretty quickly waved it off, but they did not go to VAR, which was interesting, as the events that would follow, I think, would show as well. So then just 3 minutes later, Morocco won a corner and crossed it in, and the ball was cleared pretty quickly. It didn't look like anything was going to happen. But then immediately, Brahim Diaz, the Real Madrid forward and one of the forwards for Morocco, was immediately just pleading his case with the ref. And so ultimately with that, and obviously the whole stadium going crazy, the ref eventually relented, and they went to VAR review. As it's happening, of course, there was tons of controversy as Senegal was upset about the non-call or the non-VAR review and call that waved off their goal just minutes earlier, plus that call in literally the 95th minute. So, this was basically the end of the game. After not too long of a review, the ref comes back and rewards them a penalty kick, and basically all chaos just broke loose. There was scuffles going on between the players, between the coaches, arguments happening. The Somali delegation of Senegalese fans that were there tried to rush onto the field. They were throwing things. Really, it was a chaotic scene. Just watching it from here on TV, it was really wild, all that was happening. Ultimately, and what was really controversial is that the Senegalese coach had their team go back into the locker room, and basically in protest of the calls, and partially potentially for safety, but mostly protesting the calls. They all went back into the locker room except for one player, which was Sadio Mane, who's probably the most well-known Senegalese player, who was at one point the English Premier League Player of the Year, and is the leading scorer all time in the history of Senegal, is one of the most prolific West African players of all time. He was like kind of the last lone player left on the pitch while everyone else had gone back into the locker room. We're getting, up into the 15th, ultimately made to the 20th minute of extra time of just chaos continuing to ensue. Eventually, Mane, after he talked with Claude Leroy, who's a French former coach of multiple different African teams, including Senegal, you kind of saw him talking with Mane, and then Mane ran back into the locker room, kind of encouraged, I guess, his team to come back out. And so they came back out. And finally Diaz took the penalty. And honestly, from everything I've heard and seen, just the worst penalty that I've ever seen at that level of competition. Tried to do like the Panenka, like chip the goalie and just hit it right down the middle. And Edward Mendy, the goalie for Senegal, just easily saved it. And the game immediately went into extra time. And then 4 minutes into extra time, Senegal scored just a laser of a goal. Went up 1-0, held on to the lead and won. And so it was their second AFCON title in the last 4 years. Obviously things, everyone there's tons of controversy online, but here in Dakar that people did not care. They were going crazy. There's fireworks being shot off everywhere, people driving through the streets, blaring their car horns, people just running around, dancing, shouting. Literally, we, for the most part, stayed around just the school area and didn't get too much into it, but just, I mean, all night we just could hear people outside just partying and having a good time last night. And so, yeah, just wanted to share a little bit of that. Just crazy, crazy story. And, it was quite something to see and be a part of. And you really realize just how big football is and how huge that is, in the culture here. And, yeah, just a cool thing to be a part of as, Senegal will be heading to the World Cup and a tough group with France and Norway. So, quite the way to end the AFCON tournament. So thanks guys. And, yeah, appreciate the podcast.
Christian, what a detailed and excellent match description. He has a future as a match analyst if he wants it. That was excellent.
I mean, I always loved Christian's articles back in the day. We were I guess it was my senior year. We were a sports editor and assistant sports editor together. So we go way back too. And thanks Christian for sending that in. That was so much fun to hear. And he sent in some videos too, and it was just unbelievable scenes with everyone celebrating at the school that he was at, and you could see the fireworks going up everywhere. It's just truly one of the craziest actual like on-field sports stories that I've heard in a very long time. And there are a few things. My big takeaways are, number one, protesting VAR seems to work. So maybe we should do that more. I'm a firm advocate of, not actually, but in this case, it seemed to work because it really threw Brahim Diaz off. Also, don't Panenka in that moment.
Or
like,
ever.
It's never going to work out for you. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Just smash it, finish the game. Like, your country's hopes are on your shoulders and you're trying to be cool. Like, just finish the job. You know, that's unbelievable to me. So those are my two big takeaways. I do wonder how Morocco is going to do in the World Cup, though, because they continue to seem very solid. And, you know, they were so solid last time. And sometimes, like, I wonder with a team like that, that's kind of like, you know, comes out of nowhere. Like, are they going to be a one-hit wonder situation? But they seem so defensively solid that I think both of these teams will do well in the World Cup if Senegal can make it out of their group.
Yeah, the other thing that Christian reminded me of is I think I forgot to say this, but that Morocco was the host. So, you know, when you think about even the way that the ref is thinking in that moment, right? There's often a lot of favoritism to the home side in that kind of situation. Also, just the fan atmosphere, just incredibly slanted toward Morocco. So all good points. Of course, to your point, John, I believe that I advocated when we talked about the Ballon d'Or. I believe that I advocated that Achraf Hakimi should have won the Ballon d'Or.
You did,
and
yeah.
He is obviously like the star player of Morocco. So as far as I'm concerned, like the best player in the world plays for Morocco. Plus, like we mentioned, many other excellent players, including the forward for Real Madrid, like Christian mentioned. So both these teams, it would not shock me at all if both Senegal and Morocco were in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. That would be
right.
completely reasonable.
I can't believe you've come off your Erling Haaland as the best player in the world train. Times have really changed. Chad's become a Haaland hater. Bookmark that, everyone.
Erling Haaland was completely shut down by the Manchester United center backs last Saturday, and that's all I have to say on that matter.
And by Bodo Glimt. Just
True.
really exciting.
All right, John. Let's briefly talk about our favorite topic, which is sports gambling.
I love sports gambling. It's my favorite topic to talk about.
It takes up so much of our time. You know, we are now in a situation where every month there are new investigations and arrests and just blatant corruption taking place because of sports gambling. And we have a brand new story. This is not the Chauncey Billups one or the Shohei Ohtani one or any of the other ones. This is a brand new investigation in the world of college basketball.
Is this the worst one so far?
Well, I mean, in terms of number of players involved, it is outside of the Turkish soccer league. It might be the biggest one, but
like in terms of U.S. involvement, to me, this is our worst nightmare. And we say that every time, but
one NBA head coach is,
right. But Chauncey Billups wasn't necessarily indicted for.
That's true. He was not placing
sports
Yes.
gambling specifically, right?
You're right.
Like it's possible that he was, but that was not as well defined. I agree that that's worse in an NBA player with that amount of money being involved is a really big deal with Terry Rozier. But the scope of this one is what concerns me. In basically a couple weeks ago, law enforcement revealed that they were investigating 39 players on 17 D1 college basketball teams. That is a lot of players. It's important to note, so in the, I believe, 26 defendants that ESPN mentioned, Shane Hennon and Marvis Fairley, who were both involved in the NBA betting scheme that we discussed a couple of months ago, who were basically helping fix this whole betting scheme on the NBA side of things, were also involved in this college basketball thing. So this is the same people that all are just have their fingers throughout the basketball world, it feels like. Former NBA player Antonio Blakeney, who played for the Chicago Bulls at one point and was kind of a journeyman, played in China for some time as well, is basically kind of the locus of how this scheme started, because he went off to China and then got involved with these sports gambling fixers. And he was basically a point of contact with Chinese basketball players to start rigging Chinese basketball games and do point shaving, basically. And eventually this gang, this crew of gambling criminals, decided that the next way to expand their racket was college basketball. And they rigged in different scenarios, right? You know, in terms of how, whether gambling against the spread or gambling against the team winning or a certain player scoring a certain amount of points, like they did it all. And it impacts active college basketball players who are playing for their teams, week in and week out. And for some teams that, maybe it's not like the cream of the crop of college basketball who aren't raking in NIL money, but those are the exact kind of players that we're worried about. And there are players, on teams like Tulane, Buffalo, Kennesaw State, which Liberty played against quite often in our times in college. And I don't know, I think like when corruption reaches that level where it's that widespread among players at that level, like it means the whole kind of bottom echelon of the D1, not like D3, like of the D1 sport that kind of supports the rest of the ecosystem. Like if one of these teams makes it to March Madness, right? Like those are conceivable opportunities. Kennesaw State has made it to March Madness in the last couple of years. So this is a really big deal to me. I think it's a huge deal.
Yeah, we'll continue to talk about this story in the weeks and months ahead. I think this has always been, college has always been, I think, especially concerning to you and I, because the financial temptations for, what used to be unpaid, but now, relatively small paid college players via NIL, I think there's a much, much, much stronger temptation for this kind of cheating and this kind of behavior. And I think that this is just an area that is ripe for this kind of corruption. These adults, these criminals are dangling money in front of 18 to 22-year-old kids, a lot of money to do bad things. And I'm not at all surprised that I guess what I'm trying to say is there's going to be a lot more than just 39 players, right? We've yet to begin to scratch the surface of what all this could mean. But I think that the temptation for corruption is just always going to be more prevalent among college kids than among relatively higher paid professional athletes.
Right. I mean, which is why, the defendants basically said the fixers in this scheme, the law enforcement has records of them basically saying that they were actively targeting players who were not making enough NIL money to not be tempted by these kind of schemes. And they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars and splitting them between players on teams. Like there were, large swaths of players on teams like Robert Morris, for example, who were all in on this together and we're all making money. And because basketball, I think what's interesting about basketball is I think it is ripe specifically for match fixing because there are so few players. And so you have much more of an ability to impact the result of a game where, unless a whole team is throwing things in soccer or football, it is more difficult unless you're like the quarterback of an NFL team or a college football team to impact things as much as these basketball players. If you have two starters out of a 5-man starting roster are trying to throw the game, like that is going to seriously impact the result of a game
That's a
in the
great
way that
point.
like two offensive tackles, that may put your quarterback in danger, but it's not exactly the same amount of impact. And so you're like, I think the likelihood of you betting on your own like individual stats in football would happen, but you're less able to impact the full point spread, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anything else on this story?
No, I think we're just gonna have to keep an eye on it. I think what's
Yeah, we
interesting
will.
is like this. It's clear that this ring keeps popping up in different places as the government investigates further. So my question is basically like, how many of these rings are there? Because it keeps being the same people involved. If this group basically dries up, my question would be like, are there a ton of other duplicate rings that are doing similar things, or are these kind of the trailblazers in basketball gambling and match fixing? And if you cut the head off the snake now, will that kind of help mitigate this issue? But I don't think it will until college sports gambling is banned. My stance ultimately is like, this cannot continue existing. I don't think we cannot allow sports gambling on college sports at all, is my stance. And I don't understand why this continues to be the case.
Yeah, completely agree. John, it's changing topics here. It is very, I think, perilous to talk about upcoming. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not guaranteeing that this podcast will be out by tomorrow's playoff games. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time previewing and predicting games that people likely won't have listened to until those games have already happened. I will just say, like, my Super Bowl prediction is still going strong. Yours
It
is
is.
halfway going strong. And we're going to have a big showdown here because I have the the Seahawks and the Patriots still in, of course. You predicted the Rams to win, and they're still in. Unfortunately, the Jags did not
Are
meet
very
their
much
end of
not
the
in.
bargain. Um, and we're going to spend more time actually talking about the teams that are not in the playoffs and their head coaching situations across the board. But before we do that, I don't know if we'll podcast again before the Super Bowl. Usually we try to podcast right
I'm
after
sure
the
we
Super
will.
Bowl. Maybe we
Yeah.
will before. It's still 3
Yeah.
weeks. We will see. Regardless, though, how are we feeling about the playoffs and the teams that are left? And any preliminary Super Bowl thoughts?
I would say that like this year, to me, this 3-year run for the NFL, since basically the Chiefs Super Bowl win with Taylor Swift in tow, has been the NFL like at the peak of its powers in a completely new way. And what's fun about this year specifically is that the NFL without the Chiefs going deep is even more fun than it has been. I think this playoff series, since the wild card round started, has been really the best playoffs that I can remember ever in my time as an NFL fan. Almost every game in the wild card round, with the exception of like one or two, was a one possession game. The divisional rounds, there were a couple Seahawks. The Seahawks just dismantled the 49ers. But that was still a great showing. But we had some great battles there as well. Rams Bears in particular was one that just blew me away. The Bears Packers was also incredible.
Bills Broncos went to overtime.
Bills Broncos was amazing. Like there were so many phenomenal matchups where it just felt like everything was on the line with one drive left to go. And that's exactly what you want out of the NFL playoffs. And, there were a couple tough refereeing decisions at times, especially one in Bills Broncos that sent Josh Allen home, also lost Sean McDermott his job ultimately. But most of it was really not up to the refs. It was mostly up to teams just locking things down on defense and hitting long field goals and clutch last minute throws. I think one big takeaway for me is Caleb Williams is the real deal. He did throw a pick in overtime to let the Rams go through, but he has now had the two best throws of the year in back-to-back playoff games. And I think the Bears, if they hold on to him and can keep building around him with Ben Johnson at the helm, they are going to leave their mark in the NFL for the next 5 years. He just has phenomenal talent, and if he irons out those mistakes in his game of just being a little bit too overconfident, kind of like Mahomes early on, like I think he will win the Super Bowl. That's my prediction right now.
Yeah, I think a lot, I think there are several quarterbacks who have really moved in my estimation, for good and for bad. in this playoff. CJ Stroud as kind of the opposite of Caleb Williams, where like that was an amazing team, one of the best defenses in football, and CJ Stroud's mistakes individually,
Yeah.
I think, cost that
Abominable.
team
Yep.
a lot. The amount of turnovers that he committed, both in their win against the Steelers and then in their loss against the Patriots. I agree with you 100% on Caleb Williams. I continue to be really impressed by Jordan Love, who didn't win that game against the Bears, but that was a very, very good game. You know, even Trevor Lawrence, that was not a bad showing by the Jaguars against the Bills. And I think he has a lot to be proud of. Unfortunately, and this is just tragic, is one of the brightest quarterbacks of this season, Bo Nix, who, you know, was the number 1 seed in the conference, beat the Bills. He broke his ankle on like the second to last play of the game and is not going to be playing in these final 2 games if they make it to the Super Bowl. And that's just, to me, just a devastating like season-ending injury for the Broncos, who would have had a very good shot, I think, at beating the Patriots with Bo Nix at the helm. And now it's, again, I like I said, where people might know the outcome of this game before they listen to this podcast, but at least for me now on Saturday afternoon, it's hard for me to conceive of a scenario in which the Broncos win this game tomorrow.
Yeah, with Jarrett Stidham, who's barely played in the NFL the last couple of years, like that would be a miracle. So we'll see what happens.
It would,
but it is tough that Bo Nix doesn't have the opportunity, because I do think I would almost expect the Broncos at home to be the favorite to get to the Super Bowl right now, given the situation. So, and just another note, the excitement of these playoffs has been borne up in the ratings. The divisional round averaged 39.2 million viewers per game, which is the second highest ever for this round of the playoffs since ratings began being measured by Nielsen in 1988.
Wow.
Second highest ever.
Wow.
Texans New England Patriots was the most watched ESPN event of all time at 37 million viewers. Like, event period, since ESPN was founded. So like this, the NFL is really back. Like, even just on the ground, anecdotally, when I'm going around talking to people, like every group that I'm like aware of has some kind of interest in what's going on in the NFL right now. And I do think that like it's interesting to see, even when you have teams that maybe aren't the like big market teams necessarily that we expect to be there all the time, when you have the drama that the NFL is delivering literally every week right now, it does bring people in. And it just goes to show why the NFL is the most valuable TV product probably in the world.
Yeah, and I think it is a lot of different factors, right? I think it is the rise of the NFL. It is, I think, the different markets for this playoff. But I think also, and you said this, and I just want to emphasize it again, the first 4 playoff games this season were the margin of victory was either 3 points or 4 points. Every single game went down to the wire, had a game-winning drive inside of 3 minutes. Like, it was just unbelievably dramatic football for the first Saturday and the Sunday slate of games and that just set an awesome tone for these playoffs. There's a lot of young players, a lot of people trying to make a name for themselves. There's just a lot of interest in kind of what the future of the NFL is going to look like in terms of who are leading these teams. The games have been good. They're going to continue to be good. You know, we may very, very well have like a new quarterback winning the Super Bowl unless you know, Matt Stafford can do it. And he barely escaped Bryce Young and the Panthers in week 1, which was also amazing. So it's just been awesome. The whole playoff has just been very, very excellent. And I say that despite the dismantling that my Steelers suffered at the hands of the Texans.
Yeah, that was tough. And we have Steelers news to get to in a second. That is breaking news as we're recording. Yeah. But I just want to ask you a question. I've been pondering this for a while. And, you know, we've got this new crop of quarterbacks that are starting to rise. We have teams that are really building excellent rosters like the Bears that I think have a lot of potential. And my question is, the Chiefs are out this year. Patrick Mahomes got injured late on and should be back by the beginning of next season, pretty much, it sounds like. But the question is, where we're at right now, is there going to be another Chiefs dynasty? Or do we think that, I feel like he'll win at least one more. But like, if you were going to predict it right now, is this a blip on the radar for the Chiefs? Or is this something serious that like we had a Chiefs dynasty period and it's not going to come back? You don't even have to answer that in this show, but I just want you to think about that because I'm asking myself that question, and I'm not sure what the answer is.
It's a good question. I still think that Patrick Mahomes will win 2 more Super Bowls,
Okay.
which would put him at 5.
Yep.
But I no longer believe that he is going to equal or eclipse Brady. And I think a good comparison for my thinking is how I feel about Sinner and Alcaraz in tennis, which is when I was very high on Mahomes, it was because no one could stop him. Like we had seen him take down everyone, and there was no one really with the ability to stop him. Tom Brady had done it one time, like Joe Burrow had done it one time, and that was it. And so it was really like I felt like Mahomes was in a window where he was all by himself and the Chiefs were all by themselves. And that is not true anymore. Like Caleb Williams is not going anywhere. I think CJ Stroud is going to get better. Like Josh Allen, if the Bills get the right head coach, they're going to be great again. Like I really do believe that the competition has caught up kind of in a way that we're still looking for that to happen in men's tennis. We talked about this a lot, how like we're just waiting for a third person to even challenge Alcaraz and Sinner and no one can do it. And I felt like I was feeling the same way about the Chiefs. And then this season, 6 or 7 guys like Bo Nix and CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams like stepped up and said, "No, we're going to do that." And so, it's entirely possible that like we might have in the next 5 Super Bowls, we might have 5 different winners.
Right.
And that'd be awesome.
And I think part of it is, and we're going to get to coaching now in a second here, which I think it matters a lot. I think the roster building really matters in this conversation because the Chiefs have had, Mahomes hasn't necessarily been the best quarterback in the league for the last couple years. He's gotten the job done. Like when they won the Super Bowl, he got the job done. But that defensive unit for the Chiefs was the best defense in the NFL in big game situations. Even if statistically it wasn't always all the time, it was a team that got stops when it mattered and suffocated you. And the Chiefs obviously were not that this year, but there are so many other rosters now that are so well built and so well tuned in the way that the Eagles were last year. It feels like there are multiple teams like that now. And I think that's great for the sport because it's good to have a good batch of teams that are actually well put together, that are actually consistent. And I think, I don't know, when the like you win every game magic wears off, I just think it's going to be interesting to see like, is Andy Reid going to rebuild this team fully? Because, we're seeing a lot of other, long lasting head coaches who are not lasting in their jobs now. I'm obviously not saying Andy Reid should be fired, but that's one to watch as we think about how the NFL is evolving right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about coaching.
I think this is a big story.
This is huge. And it's not just huge for this season, but I think it speaks to a lot of trends that we've been circling for the last couple of years on this podcast. 10 coaching vacancies this season out of 32 teams.
9 firings.
Yeah.
Plus a step down.
Plus Mike Tomlin. There's a lot of just a whole lot of movement among head coaches, a lot of impatience with teams that have been very good. I think, last time we podcasted, we were talking about the longest tenured coaches, and it was Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, and then Sean McDermott. Those were the 3 longest tenured coaches. All 3 of them are now gone or have moved.
Well, I think Andy Reid was 3, but
Andy Reid was
Sean
the 3rd. That's right. And so now we're in this crazy situation where John Harbaugh is going to be coaching for the Giants next year, and Mike McCarthy is the Steelers head coach. Breaking news today, which is just like mind blowing to me. I've been thinking. I'll start with this. I don't want to go on a filibuster here, but I've been thinking a lot about the state of head coaching in the NFL ever since Mike Tomlin stepped down, because the Steelers historically had been doing things so differently, and I think there was a direct correlation between the success of a team and their patience with their head coaches. The example I love to use was that the Steelers are now looking for their 4th head coach since 1969, and the Las Vegas Raiders are looking for their 4th head coach since 2022. And you can just tell the difference between those franchises. And I've always believed that coaching takes time and patience, and that if you fire a coach after 1 year, that doesn't mean that that coach failed. That means that you failed at identifying the right coach. That's a failure by the ownership and the management, not the coach. Every coach needs time to make things work. And I guess, I texted you and I asked you a question and I want to talk about it on the podcast, which is just, do you believe that we will ever see a head coach in any American sport with a 19-year tenure with the team? I think that that is an era of the past. I don't think it's ever going to happen again. And I think that's disappointing. And I think that speaks to impatience and fan culture and social media and all the noise that are around these kind of teams and these jobs now, and how demanding and impatient both fans and owners are. But I believe that Mike Tomlin is kind of the last of an era.
Yeah,
And I don't
I think
think
it's
we'll
true.
ever see anything like it ever again. And I think that's too bad.
No, I think that era is 100% over, which is tough. But I do think it's true for a lot of reasons. I think one of them. Maybe we can just take a step back and talk about how statistically significant this year was for a minute. So we said there were 10 vacancies, 9 firings, and then Mike Tomlin stepped down. In the NFL, that has happened twice since the AFL and the NFL merged in 1970 to form what we now know as the NFL. That's happened. 9 firings have happened in 1977 and 2008, and now in 2026. So it's happened before, but this is close to unprecedented. If we count Mike Tomlin as like being forced out potentially, which I don't know if he
And
was,
I don't believe that.
Regardless, that is a close to unprecedented level of turnover for NFL coaches, and that's unusual for the sport of football. And part of the reason for that is the NFL and American sports in general are relatively, as international sports go, forgiving of coaches because tanking is something that happens. So when a team doesn't have the depth to really succeed and win a title, the way the NFL specifically is structured incentivizes you, if you're bad, being really bad, so that you can get draft picks and get cap space and then build a roster that's going to actually be good. And that's a thing that teams can genuinely use, and it genuinely helps them improve. The Texans were like the worst team in the NFL a few years ago, like by a mile. And now, they're in the playoffs consistently year after year. They obviously are not quite what they want to be in terms of success in the playoffs, but still, like when they're winning playoff games, they're making it. They're doing well in their division. In the world of soccer, that doesn't happen because soccer is structured where if you do poorly, you are punished essentially immediately in terms of the financial compensation that you get for placing high in the league, but also potentially getting relegated. And so you see in soccer, there is the immediate pressure of results at all times, where you don't have the ability to be the worst team in the league, because if you're the worst team in the league one year, you're out of the league, and that's just, those financial penalties are just going to keep stacking on themselves over time. So small teams get in that issue where, like, if things are going badly, they have to fire their coach, or at least feel that they have to, so that they can keep themselves afloat. And big teams feel the pressure of, if we're not winning immediately, then someone else is, and they're accumulating resources and we're not. And so there's this constant zero-sum game in the sport of soccer. And the NFL is just structured differently. And so I think in the past, that's given coaches a longer tenure because ownership is willing to be more patient, because it's just a little bit more of a long-lasting thing. But I think you hit the nail on the head, and maybe we should dig into this. I think a lot of this, the structure of the NFL hasn't changed, right? Like the way draft picks work in relation to your positioning in the league table is the same that it's been for a long time. But what's different is that I think there's a cultural shift in the NFL, partially due to social media. I think people listen to fans and rage on Twitter more than they used to, genuinely. And I think it plays an actual role. And I don't know why necessarily. I don't know. What do you think? Like, it feels like ownership has become less patient than it used to be.
I think that ownership listened to fans and fan frustrations. And I also think that coaches listen to fans and won't put up with it. Like, I 100% believe that Pittsburgh Steelers fans are part of the reason why Mike Tomlin quit. The fact
Do you
that
think
he,
the
fact
Twitter
that he
ecosystem really
was,
does make a difference?
he was being booed at games.
That's true. That did happen.
People were chanting for him to be fired. And I think that he didn't like the atmosphere that he was coaching in. I think that in a large part that's because of the fans. And I think that that's part of why he quit. I think among other franchises, it is certainly true that fan frustration plays into the decisions made by ownership and general managers. And I also think that it's so interesting because, 10 years ago, so there was so much talk about how trendy it was to tank and rebuild, right? The trust the process 76ers became a whole thing. And now it seems like nobody wants to rebuild. Like every
The
team
big
seems
teams
to
now.
think
Yeah.
that that they're just one or two moves away from fixing everything. And I hate to be so Steelers focused, but I think another perfect example of this is the decision we've made to hire Mike McCarthy. Before Mike McCarthy, John, when Mike Tomlin was hired as the Steelers coach, he was 34 years old. Before him, when Bill Cowher was hired as the Steelers coach, he was 34 years old. Before him, when Chuck Noll was hired as the Steelers coach, he was 37 years old. 3 coaches in a row in their 30s when they were hired. That's a decision that you make because you want stability in your franchise for decades. And that's exactly what the Steelers got. The Steelers just hired 62-year-old Mike McCarthy. He's almost twice as old as Mike Tomlin was when he was hired. That's a completely different cultural way. That's a completely different way of thinking. That is the kind of thinking of we need a quick fix, right? We need someone to come in and boost the energy and make us a contender again. It's the same kind of thinking, I think, in a different way that led to UNC football hiring Bill Belichick late in his 60s. These decisions are now being made with the full knowledge that these coaches will be staying 5 years or less. And they believe that that within that 5-year window or whatever, they can win something. And I just fundamentally disagree with that philosophy. I disagree with that way of thinking. I think Mike McCarthy's a good coach. He's a Super Bowl champion. He has a great relationship with Aaron Rodgers, who might come back for another year now. Like, I understand the reasons why that happened. But to me, like, it is not Steelers football to hire a coach in their 60s. That's not what the Steelers historically were looking for in a coach. It's just a huge trend change.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And to go back to soccer as an interesting example, you see, I do think that these sports are becoming more and more similar in interesting ways because you see teams like the Raiders had Pete Carroll as their coach this last year, who, had been the Seahawks coach for a long time. Also, I think in the 60s or 70s, even maybe
70
at this point. They've had 12 coaches. You brought them up earlier. They've had 12 coaches since 2002. That's a coach every 2 years, which basically means they just give someone a shot and they're like, nope, that was a bad year. You're out. And the Raiders have never been good in that time, as far as I know. Certainly not in my time as a fan over the last decade. I think that what's difficult about this is that I think you're 100% right that there's a lack of longevity in all of these teams now and thinking about. I think it's a trend that is true across society right now. So it's not just sports, but it's fascinating that it is trickling so firmly down into sports now. And I think you're right that a lot of it is fan culture. There is, if you go on to the Twitter mentions of any team that's not the number one best performing team in the world in their respective sport, no one is like trusting the process. Everyone, even Arsenal fans, like there is a big group of Arsenal fans that are very much behind our manager, Mikel Arteta, and are like, no matter what goes wrong, he's the guy, we believe. But you have every single game from week to week. If the team doesn't perform excellently, there's a huge percentage of social media people who are like, this manager sucks. Every single player on our team sucks. We need to get rid of all of them. Everything is the worst. And that's true, I feel like, for every team.
How many months was Xavi Alonso Real Madrid's manager?
It was not, 6.
Yeah, it was less than a year.
Like Real Madrid has always been like that, though. So like there are specific soccer teams like in the soccer world that have always been that way. So Chelsea, Real Madrid. Chelsea has had.
Well, that's true in the NFL too, right? The Texans and the Browns are the same way.
But the Raiders have had the most turnover in the last century.
Yeah.
And they've had 12. I think my count with both full-time and interim have had over 20 coaches since 2002. Around between 15 and like 18 full-time managers, depending on how you count, since 2002. So like that's basically every single year almost. And I think that mentality is going to other teams now because social media is so aggressive that everyone just always feels like everything needs to be perfect or you need to blow it all up and go all over again. But I think it's weird. The NFL ultimately, like, my big thought here is like the NFL has always been different because people just have more time. Everything takes more time, and it's okay for it to take more time. And now I think you're right that that patience is gone. But I think what's funny is that it doesn't reflect reality. Like, only one of the 32 NFL teams is going to win the title in any given year. In the NFL, because you can't stack your resources, you just are never going to keep a dynasty going for that long. Where
Yeah,
you
like
can just do
Sean
it year over year over
McDermott.
year.
Sean McDermott had like the third best win percentage of any team in his time at the Bills,
And
and
still got fired.
was fired. You know, he won more than every team but like two, and they sent him packing. Like
And I
I
feel like
think
this is the worst Bills roster in the last like 6 years
right,
since they've
and
been
like
challenging for the Super Bowl.
and they've been in the playoffs and they've won playoff games essentially every year. And then one year when they don't win the division and lose in the second round of the playoffs, he gets sent packing. To me, like it's really crazy to me. And I think that there are certainly times when you hire a coach and you immediately realize this is not going to work and you make a change. Like I never believed in Mike McDaniel at Miami. I think that went on way longer than it needed to. You know, someone like Josh McDaniel when he was the Raiders coach, he had been given multiple chances at being a head coach. I just don't
He's not
believe
there.
he's head coaching
Yeah.
material. That's fine. He went back to the Patriots to be their offensive coordinator for like the third time. But then you have guys like McDermott or John Harbaugh or Tomlin, and you think, wow, those guys have not only won consistently, they've brought the floor of their teams up so high, but sometimes they've actually caused rosters to overperform. And that's my biggest thing with Tomlin. People are going to criticize Tomlin because he hadn't won playoff games in a long time. You're going to criticize him for that. That's totally fine.
Yep.
But my fundamental belief is that Mike Tomlin has consistently taken rosters that are worth 7-10 or 6-11 and made them 10-7 every season. Like he has elevated the floor of objectively poor rosters. And just because he's lost in the playoffs does not mean that he has that season was a failure, because it's not that, oh, we should have won in the playoffs. It's that maybe we had no business being in the playoffs in the first place, but for Mike Tomlin being excellent. And it's the same argument people make about LeBron James, which is like, but he has so many losses in the NBA finals. And it's like, yeah, he made the finals. LeBron James made the finals when Matthew Dellavedova was his second best player in 2015. That is a miracle, and it is an accomplishment. If he had beaten the Warriors, that would have been the greatest miracle in the history of sports. The fact that he made the playoffs, made the finals and lost is a credit, not a hindrance. And I feel the same way about Tomlin. And maybe Mike McCarthy for a couple years will elevate the Steelers offensively and maybe we'll even do a little bit better. But when we, in the next 5 years, have our first 6-11 season, people are going to start missing Mike Tomlin. And other Steelers fans, never me, but other Steelers fans are going to regret the way they spoke about Tomlin when we spend 5 or 6 years being the Cleveland Browns.
Right. Well, I mean, the Tennessee Titans have seen the exact same thing. Like, we had Mike Vrabel, and towards the end of his time in Tennessee, I mean, he took the Titans to the AFC Championship. Towards the end of his time in Tennessee, things did not go well. They missed out on winning the division. It was a scrappy time, and the team really did start underperforming. But a lot of that was because management just wasn't backing him, wasn't backing his personnel choices, and he raised the level of the team every single year and then got fired. The Titans have become objectively way worse since he left, and he's now a step away from going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right. And
in year one,
it's unquestionable that, like, the Titans, I think, made the wrong choice in firing him. But I also think it's fair that sometimes a coach does hit a ceiling at evolving a team. I don't know that Vrabel was there, but I do think that, over basically a decade, Tomlin hit a point where he wasn't evolving the Steelers to something else. I don't think that Mike McCarthy is necessarily that guy, but I do think that, like, to me, the Tomlin era was reaching its end of, like, are you ever going to be competitive at going deep into the playoffs ever again? And I don't think the answer was that they were going to evolve to that point with Tomlin there. And so I understand that decision. To me, though, like, the Harbaugh decision, like, the Ravens fired John Harbaugh after them not making the playoffs. And John Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl just like Mike Tomlin did, but it was a while ago. And John Harbaugh has taken them deep in the playoffs year over year. And I think you made a mistake in firing a coach when they are immediately the number one candidate for every other team. And that's what the Ravens did. And it's just insane decision making.
I'm sorry. So your contention is that the coach who didn't make the playoffs with a 2-time MVP did not deserve to be fired, but the coach who beat the Ravens twice and made the playoffs with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback deserved to be fired.
I didn't say that Tomlin deserved to be fired. No, I definitely did not say that.
You said it's understandable, and that the Ravens one is out. John Harbaugh was in so much better of a situation than Mike Tomlin has been in for the last 10 years, and was consistently being knocked out of the playoffs by Mike Tomlin with scrub quarterbacks, while he's had what is often considered by many people to be the best quarterback in the NFL.
Well, first of all, Harbaugh definitely did not get knocked out of the playoffs by Tomlin in any of these years.
This year.
Except, this year he did, yes. But that was the Ravens' fault all the way around. I'm obviously not like John Harbaugh's the best coach in the NFL, but I do think that like Harbaugh has a future in this league. And I don't know that. Do you think Tomlin's going to come back?
I think he will take a year off by choice. And I think that next year, I think that there are 17 teams that would fire their head coach immediately to have Mike Tomlin.
See, I just don't. That's interesting.
I think Mike Tomlin could walk into half of the jobs in football, and not only would they like it, and they would fire their current coach to get him. I think he is so much more desirable as a head coach than John Harbaugh, who underperformed with a 2-time MVP at quarterback, while Tomlin was dragging Mason Rudolph, Aaron Rodgers, and Kenny Pickett to the playoffs year after year after year.
See, the difference here is that I think all of John Harbaugh's choking in the playoffs has been Lamar's fault. I don't blame John Harbaugh for any of those things. I blame the Ravens for drafting Lamar.
I think that's fair.
That's the difference, is what I'm saying. Like every time that Lamar chokes in the playoffs has been Lamar's fault for choking in the playoffs to me. So I think that Harbaugh has built a really good defense year over year, has gotten them into positions to win, and then in the situations where you expect your MVP quarterback to be an MVP quarterback, he hasn't done it, which, to be fair, is exactly what Josh Allen has done in a lot of these situations too. And that's what's tough, is it's like, I think Sean McDermott is really in the exact same situation that John Harbaugh is. And that's the difference between winning and losing. Like, I hear you about Tomlin specifically, but with each of these coaches, they have had multiple bites at the cherry, and they have not gotten the job done and actually made it to the Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl in a long, long time.
You're right. And of course, like, we can't actually prove this because Mike Tomlin was not in the coaching. Like, he wasn't taking interviews this year. Like, if the Giants had a straight up choice between Tomlin and Harbaugh, I would have been very curious to see who their top choice would have been. And the reality is that Tomlin was just not taking interviews at this point. So there's no way to know. It is certainly, you're 100% right that John Harbaugh was the most sought after coach this cycle. He got a job very quickly. I think he's going to be a good fit with Jackson Dart. I think that's going to be a good team. So I in no way want to excoriate, or I don't even know if that's a word. I don't mean to.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that John Harbaugh is a good coach. He's going to do well in the future. I just don't believe that his departure was more of a problem than Tomlin's. Like,
and I hear you. I'm not Mike Tomlin. I love Mike Tomlin. He's had an incredible career. I just don't know. There is a point where you say, like, is this coach evolving to the next level where the NFL is right now? And you see Ben Johnson.
Like, if you were the Titans GM, would you have taken if you would have taken Harbaugh over Tomlin?
That's a tough choice for me. Like, I would rather take a Ben Johnson. You know,
sure. Okay,
right now, like going to like those 30-year-old candidates who are new, who are like the cutting edge of what the league can be. That's what I would like. Like, you want a Sean McVay early in his career, right? Who can stay for a long time and build a roster. The Titans hired Robert Saleh, which is it's an interesting. I mean, we'll see what happens there. But between Harbaugh and Tomlin, like, I think they're both good coaches, and I also think that they're both not necessarily a coach that I expect to win a Super Bowl again in their career. And
I
that's
think
where
that's
I'm at.
fair.
You know,
I'm coping with the fact that, and again, I'm rooting for Mike McCarthy. I hope that he does very well.
yes.
But I'm very much coping with the fact that the Steelers head coach now was the Tennessee Titans' second choice. That's very disappointing to me. Like that's the one. Like we now have the coach that the Titans passed on for Robert Saleh, and that
Which
just
who
like
knows if that's a good decision or not.
I don't know, but that like fundamentally that does not sit well with me.
I mean, the last job that Mike McCarthy had, if I remember correctly, was the Cowboys.
The Cowboys,
right? Where he did not. I mean, he took them deep in the playoffs every time in his time there, but they choked in calamitous fashion also every time.
Talk about a quarterback that like if you want to talk about like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, like the Dak Prescott experience has just been awful. He's
Dak
been the
has
starting
had-
quarterback for like 10 years now.
And he's had opportunities to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. Is it like Dak Prescott had a window where he could have done it, and he was not the guy.
Yeah. So I don't want to get too frustrated or heated, and I'm not going to fight with you about Tomlin. We've had these text exchanges, and I'm always going to be just like the biggest Mike Tomlin believer for the rest of time.
Which is how you should be. That is a crucial part of the Crunching Tackles experience. We should also note that in terms of rivalries, tomorrow on Sunday, January 25th, is the biggest Crunching Tackles derby probably in podcast history.
Yeah.
Arsenal's playing Manchester United at home. Arsenal is, looking to try to keep up its lead at the top of the table. United is closing in, maybe not on the top of the table, but on getting into the Champions League. And they just beat Man City last week. So
yeah, I mean we've watched
good,
a lot of these games together or separately, and this one feels different because, like you said, Arsenal are, top of the table. It's not comfortable, right? Like if you lose, it's a 4-point gap, but it's a firm lead. United have a caretaker manager. They just beat Manchester City. Like the vibes are starting to feel like they're back, maybe. And so it just is like it's certainly the best position Arsenal has ever been in for a derby like this, and it maybe is the most energized Manchester United has been in the last half decade. And so it's gonna be fun.
It's exciting.
It's gonna be really exciting.
Snow Day Soccer is here. We are going to be ready. I feel confident. Arsenal has a fit squad. We're ready to play.
We're playing with house money. If we lose, we should have lost. And if we won, then like we're way back.
We'll see what happens. I certainly hope that doesn't happen for our sake.
Yeah.
I told you before the pod, and I'm saying it now. If Arsenal doesn't win the league this year, they never will.
Arteta out? If you don't win this year? Are you pulling the plug?
No. Arteta is my Mike Tomlin.
Managers?
Arteta is my Mike Tomlin. Because he keeps evolving them every year.
So you'll let Arteta drag them to third place 10 years in a row, and you'll be fine.
That's like making it to the AFC Championship every year, which Mike Tomlin has not done.
Okay.
That's what Sean McDermott has done.
Yeah.
And we both agree that was an unjustified firing. So
I completely agree. Did you see Philip Rivers interviewed for the Bills?
It's unbelievable. That is the most important thing about our conversation today, guys. Philip Rivers is trying to be the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, which is just an outrageous.
I want it.
If they hire him, that'd be the most outrageous decision ever.
He was coaching high school football when he took the starting quarterback job for the Colts this year. And now he's positioning for a head coaching interview.
I think I would establish him. If he gets it, he's like the man of the year.
I think so. He's like the sport. Yeah. Time magazine man of the year. Philip Rivers. That'd be so great.
It would be amazing.
Anything else for today, John?
No, I think when we, are you still feeling good about the Seahawks pick? We're going to.
Yeah. They curb stomped the Niners, who are good, and they're probably going to curb stomp the Rams tomorrow.
So you're on the record. Seahawks will win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and the Patriots. I think the Patriots, who I predicted to be in the Super Bowl, are a lock tomorrow.
Okay, my pick before the playoffs started was the Rams winning the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still alive. I am worried for them, but I'm holding on to my pick. I do think that the Rams have it in them with Matt Stafford. If Sam Darnold plays a bad game tomorrow, the Rams can make the Super Bowl. And if they make it to the Super Bowl against the Patriots, I think the Rams can win.
Wow. Strong take
So I'm
by
sticking
you.
with it. I'm sticking with it.
Cool. I think this was a good podcast, a good YouTube debut. And
yes, welcome everyone again.
Welcome.
Thanks for listening.
This has been great. So, of course, we're going to put the link to our YouTube channel in the podcast description so that if you are a listener and you would like to check us out via YouTube, you're welcome to do so. If you're on YouTube, please follow and subscribe. And we'll be doing this. Our schedules like every other week or so. We'll have a new episode here. We're also, if you are a listener, we also have been doing a lot of vertical video content on our social medias, our personal social medias, as well as the podcast, which you're welcome to follow. I post on Instagram, I post on TikTok, I post on Twitter. There are lots of places to interact with our content, short form, long form, audio, video. We are now a multimedia production, and that's very exciting. So I'm looking forward to an awesome year of podcasting with you yet again, John. I'm looking forward to an awesome playoff tomorrow. This is going to be a big year for us too with the Winter Olympics and the World Cup. I think this is going to be a really, really big year for what we're doing, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yep, I think we'll have a Super Bowl preview for you guys and some discussion of the Australian Open next time we pod. So it's gonna be great. And thank you all for being here on the ride with us.
Yeah, until next time, we hope that you all continue to be well and be safe, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, cheers, guys.